So again, I'm Lydia Wilson, the Vocal Co-op Program Director, and today we're going to be working on a tool. It's basically a 7-step tool that is called a brand position statement. And what it does is it helps you really clarify how it is that your program and the services that you offer to your peers really stand out in the world of mental health support. The reason that this tool is so important is that we know from the work that we see every day in the centers and in our peers and in our community that what we do is very important, but we compete for a lot of attention in this world. Everyone, like you and I, both as folks with email accounts or phones or television, we just know from the guts, the gut feeling that there's a lot of different messages competing for our attention, and that's very true with legislators, with funders, and with our peers. So when we're able to really clearly articulate for ourselves as an organization what it is that we do that's so different in the world of mental health support, then we're able to more clearly articulate that to other people. So a brand position statement is an internal tool. That's the first thing to know about it. This isn't something that you're going to turn around and put out on your website. A brand position statement is for an executive director to communicate to the staff, also for a board to work on together. It's for any task force that happen to be working on fundraising or marketing to have and to work on together. So again, it does touch on the fact that we are competing for attention, and that's not language that we love to use in a world of mental health support or nonprofits. But it really is true, and I think once we can sort of adopt some tools from the business world and from the marketing world and just hold intention that they are from a business background, that we're going to get a lot out of using them too. We don't have to necessarily be competitive in our search for more funds or in our outreach to new peers to come to the center. But that is one of the core realities, is that that's what this statement is for, is to really help us distinguish ourselves within that competition for resources. So again, touching again, a brand position statement is an internal tool. We're not going to be broadcasting this publicly. It's a foundation for all messaging. This is not just a fundraising exercise or a marketing exercise. What we're going to craft after today's session really does get to the heart of why we exist and why we need to exist in a world where there are other mental health supports. So it does become a very foundational tool in our toolbox. The goal is for this to be non-emotional. It's fact-based research that we're going to look at who else provides supports in our community and who the demographics of our people are, for example. So for each step of these, we're going to be doing a lot of fact-based research. Things that a positioning statement is not. It's not a tagline. It's not going to be a quick, jaunty little phrase that envelops everything that we do that can be easily printed on a T-shirt. Again, it's really an internal research tool. It's not an advertising slogan. It's not a word-for-word message that you're going to be pitching directly to folks. It's not a business plan. So again, it's a tool, and you'll be using it to create those types of messages that will go to the public. So here's the formula that we're going to be looking at. One thing to know is there's a lot of different resources out there for creating a brand position statement because it is really core to a marketing plan. Some of them don't include all 7 steps. You might see one that's just the first 4 steps here. I like adding on those last 3 because, especially the because one, because it encourages us to state the evidence and the proof points for why we know that our program serves people in a unique way. So that this 6th point really drives home, again, connecting it back to your client, the benefit that they get out of it. And then best expressed by a tagline. Again, not all the work we can do is easily summed up in a tagline, but I think you'll find that what Robin Hubert of On Our Own Roanoke naturally identified a tagline that I think we all can learn a lot from. Anyway, it's up for discussion, but I really like your tagline. And so it is nice to go ahead and try to push yourself in the organization to think, well, is there a statement that does fit on the back of the T-shirt that can summarize this work that we're doing today and all we're looking at? So I've brought a couple examples of brand position statements from other communities. This is from Volvo, the automobile manufacturer. So their brand position statement, which again, even though this is an internal statement, this has been talked about in a marketing magazine. So that's where I got their statement. Again, it's not their public base, but we were able to get access to it. So their brand position statement is, for upscale American families, Volvo is the family automobile that offers maximum safety. So if we're looking at it in the 7 categories that we're going to walk through today, the first part of their demographics is to upscale American families. That's the demographic of it. Who, and again, we'll see this when we work through each step in more detail, but who is asking about the psychographics of your client, what they value, and what they want. Now, Volvo's statement here doesn't directly state it, but we can look at the rest of what they've said and we can imply that they're assuming that for upscale American families, they value safety and they value family. Their brand program, their brand is Volvo's the family automobile that offers maximum safety. And again, they're not directly stating proof points, but they're such a well-known brand, they're actually assuming here that we know their safety record. And if we were to do some research into it, we would pretty clearly see the safety record that Volvo has that they're basing this campaign on and their work on. So that, and again, they don't directly state it, but it's keeping your family safe in style. It's an upscale car brand. They do put a lot of emphasis on the comfort interior factors and the style of their automobile, but what they're really driving home is family and safety. But we do know that they're in a higher price point, and so they're within the battling within the space of the BMW and these other high-end cars that are very design focused. And their tagline, actually, Volvo's tagline is short and sweet, and it's for life, which could be explained several different ways. But when I look at for life, I look at for safety, for keeping people alive, also a daily car. That can be part of your work and your life and your family day in and day out. And it's the quality of life, also getting back into that upscale version. So that's an example from Volvo. I'm going to pop back up to the formula so we can look at that again. Again, the upscale American families, that's where they were talking about their demographics. This is where you're looking at age. You're looking at the geographic location. Psychographics are what people value and feel. The brand is the type of work that you're in. So in our case, that's mental health support more broadly. So we also know that we're in the peer-run mental health support world, but we're looking at a broader sort of distinction. Functional benefit that your work offers, and then because of the evidence proof points. This is the one that can be a little tricky. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the proof points today. And again, that's why we picked this model, because some of the brand position statements on the that you see don't go into this. And I think that the degree to which we can really discipline ourselves to look for evidence, and not just evidence-based research, but testimonials from folks, vignettes and stories of transformation. So we're really going to want to emphasize that, and we'll talk about how to get your membership involved in helping with that part too. So that the emotional benefit, which is what we see in everyday life as program directors going on in our centers, and again, we'll be able to reach out to our peer members to really get their words for what the emotional benefit are too. And then the tagline we touched on briefly is an optional part. So I've done one actually for the co-op. I wanted to challenge myself to say, okay, well, before we go leading everybody through this exercise, what would be the vocal co-op's unique brand position statement? So this is one that I hope we'll really all get to talk with each other about at the Executive Director Retreat in February and March. But for the moment, it's a draft, an exercise that I did for myself, and then I'm going to be wanting to do research with you guys to affirm or confirm or change anything that needs to be changed. So to peer-run program leaders of Virginia, who are busy executives of mental health direct service programs, the Vocal Co-op program offers centralized nonprofit technical assistance and leadership support. And I'm going to stop here, and this is a chance to talk about why this brand position statement matters so much. reality is, we've got on our Charlottesville here on the phone with us, the Center for Nonprofit Excellence over on Harris Street does an amazing job with nonprofit technical assistance. They bring in really top leaders to do excellent face-to-face presentations. They've got the Board Development Academy. They touch every area of nonprofit management, from finances to legal issues to HR to fundraising to strategic planning. So that really makes it incumbent upon the Vocal Co-op to stop and say, well, you know, what is it that the co-op offers? There already is this really powerful source for nonprofit technical assistance at the fingertips of several of our members, not just on our in Charlottesville. Actually, Vocal uses it. Other folks could easily travel up from the Richmond area. So that really gets to this next question of that. Like, what does the co-op do? And when I was thinking through it, there are a couple key differences. One, which I haven't even mentioned here, is that our services are available free of charge. But the more important piece, I think, is that it convenes directors of similar, very, very similar, very focused, specific peer-run mental health supports from around the state. We convene them together. And together, based on questions and issues that come up, we develop nonprofit best practice resources. An example is there was a question from Recovery in Motion in Fredericksburg about liability insurance, professional liability, because they're new and their insurance broker had suggested a type of coverage that didn't sit well with the board president. It just didn't feel like something we needed, and yet it did. So she was able to come to me, and I was able to go around and talk to all the different program directors about their insurance coverages. And because we do such a specific type of work together, it's different than when I call an insurance broker and just generally ask about professional liability. They don't know the field. There's a lot of explaining to do. So the co-op is able to do some of that research for folks so that program directors can stay focused on their mission and on serving their members, and other questions that are more specific and local to their center that they do need to work on. So that was one thing that I realized. We're able to sort of convene this very specific set of experience and knowledge to come up with new nonprofit best practice resources. Another really important part is that we're informed by recovery values. So some of the, for example, we're working on a strategic planning class at the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, and when it gets to this question of outcomes, what impact are we having? What does that look like? A recovery-focused nonprofit is going to have a really different sense of what wellness and recovery outcomes would be than someone else might, than another type of mental health support provider. So that's a really important part of what we do, is that all of the organizational wellness, all the strategic planning, all of the work that we're doing as a co-op and offering out to the programs is very much informed by recovery values. We're also keenly aware and focused on the requirements for publicly funded programs in Virginia, because we're getting, most all of us are reliant primarily on state, if not federal and local funds. Why does that matter? These are your proof points. Like, how do we know that the work of the co-op matters? Sustainable peer-run programs are essential to a recovery-focused mental health system. Also, most of the co-op programs are still fairly young organizations, so we know that they're generally seeking needs for support for refining some of the questions that we have. And directors have routinely expressed that they need peer support too. So the convening of people across the state is, that's one of the proof points that we also see. And the why, so that peer-run programs are healthy and sustainable so that they can reach more peers. And a tagline that I've come up with, again, this doesn't mean it's the one for the t-shirt, but is applying peer support to organizational wellness. So I thought the next thing we would do is talk about how to get started on this kind of work and a couple of the key points. Because you can just sit and sort of fill out that worksheet that I've circulated by email, which we're looking at right now. You can start drafting that out and filling it out. It's somewhat self-explanatory. But I've found when I was working through this, and then when I was also working through it with Robin Hubert, that when you go to put words onto a page right away, it can be intimidating. because it feels like the words need to be crafted perfectly in order for them to move on to the next word or to move on to the next line. So what I would suggest doing is finding a partner in the organization. So for on our own Charlottesville, that might be Christy and Aaron, or it might be Allison and Christy, whatever sort of combination you want to do it. For On Our Own of Roanoke, it wound up being Robin Hubert and I was there, so we worked on it together. You can always, anyone is always welcome to call me, and I'm happy to be the part of this process over the phone. I'm also a big believer in talking things out because I've worked in radio for so long. So you can even just find a voice recorder or the voice recorder on the phone. And start by talking about, like, okay, target audience, who comes in the center? And just start talking about it. There are, of course, other resources for finding out who it is that comes in the center. We talked about evaluation last month on the web meeting. So certainly you can always go back to those spreadsheets and look at the ages of folks, what zip codes they're reporting from, gender, any other criteria that you track that people are self-expressing that's important. But I really do find that when you just start talking about, I mean, Robin just started telling me stories of who comes in the center, of who winds up interacting with each other in what ways, of where people are in their recovery journeys, ways that she's seen them move through. And as we talked about that, we realized there were veterans that came in. We realized that there tend to be more men. We talked about why that might be, why there might be fewer women. So what we wound up coming up with, which I will scroll down here, if you can see, I've skipped forward a few slides. What we did is we just expanded out that worksheet. And so I said, okay, tell me who comes in. And so under the to target audience demographic line, which again, demographics being much more like numbers-based, age, ethnicity, gender, versus how people feel when they come in. Once she started telling me, well, you know, we get a lot of adults in a certain age range, she wound up talking to me about how those folks feel. So that's sort of the natural flow of conversation. So I just then came down to under psychographics and started taking some of those notes there. So as her partner in this, while she was talking and expressing stories and also some data about who she sees, I was able to kind of categorize those while she was talking. Or if it became too much, I would just take all the notes and then categorize them later. But that, I think, really helps free this up as a, to tap into what you do know instead of trying to craft some sort of perfect statement from step one. It's just to kind of start with what you know, which is telling stories about the people you love that come into your place. So again, with the process of getting started, find a partner. The two of you together, I encourage you actually first to review who else provides mental health supports in our area. So for the case of Robin, we'll flip forward and look at what was it she filled out. We talked not just about the CSB, which is obvious, private therapists, we identified those. Then we went into, there was a Mountain House Clubhouse, then we talked about MHA and NAMI, and we were really specific about what it is that they do. One of the reasons that you go through this is you want to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're going to be trying to persuade to give funds or try to persuade to come join your program. So what do they know about NAMI? What do they know about MHA? Well, honestly, they probably don't know how we're on our own of Roanoke is really that different. So for us to go through and think about together anyone that might be petitioning similar people for support helps us kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the person that we're petitioning to say, well, these are all the different ways that they think that mental health support is given in our community. How can we help them see that we are different with that? So it helped us to start by kind of going through the whole list. There was also Samaritan Inn, and we talked about what supports they give. They give an early morning breakfast and clothes. The rescue mission had a number of different types of shelters. And to the degree that you know how they're funded, it's great to take some notes. This does not need to be super comprehensive database, but it's a way to help help make this statement as specific as you can when it comes to points of difference. It will pop back up. So you and your partner would review who else provides supports locally and take some basic notes about that. And then go ahead and go through the statement worksheet, whether it's line by line, if that's how you think, or if it becomes more of a stream of consciousness discussion that you're going to categorize later. Because again, once we get to the step of crafting the statement, which is what we're looking at now, you're going to start by reviewing the notes and categorizing the observations. Here's an example of one that Robin and I had to work with. Again, pretty quickly you realize that demographics and psychographics, when you're telling a story about a person, you pretty quickly get to, say for example, Jane came in, she's 50, she hadn't left the house in months. A friend of hers that her therapist told her about on her own was Roanoke. So she came in, and when she first came in, she just sat in the corner because she didn't want to talk to anybody, and she wasn't really making eye contact. And just within those few sentences, we've got her age, her referral source, one of her concerns at the time, antisocial behaviors, and then get into, she finally told us she just needed a place to feel like she was welcome. So within those demographics, you're also starting to hear about what's important to her, and it's just a safe place where she's allowed to be quiet and sit in the corner. But it's also a place where she feels welcome. So we went ahead and categorized all of that out. I'm looking at a couple of the other things that Robin and I wound up identifying. We talked about the percentage of first-timers versus return visitors. So she wound up identifying that they do have, a number of people who just come once and then leave again, and come once and then leave again. And we realized that that's actually an important thing, is that it's a place where people don't have to commit to coming. It's a very self-directed process. And that is one of the ways that peer-run centers are very different than other mental health supports, is that you can come and go as you please, and it's a self-directed process. She was saying that people get a lot out of the groups. So pretty quickly when we were looking at, well, what is this work that we do? We identified that skill-building groups are an important part of that, where people learn equally from each other. So as you've got all your notes down and you've gone through and categorized them, you're going to realize that there's probably some areas that you want to do more research on, or assumptions that you're making as the director and staff and senior leaders, volunteers, peers, who you really want to test those assumptions. So ways to do some more research, for example, in the demographic session, Robin and I plan to do more research, not just about pulling the data for the demographics of who's coming right now on our own, but also the demographics of the people that we want to reach. So, for example, the state hospital discharges. What are the demographics of folks coming out of the state hospital, or of folks in the adult outpatient of the CSB? I also strongly encourage folks to ask your members for input. Once you have a draft statement out, go back to the members, and whether you want to do a survey or you want to do just simple talking one-on-one interview type, what is it that brought you here, and what do you get out of it, and why do you stay, and why do you come back? Or alternatively, if you're still in touch with folks who don't come as much anymore, why is it that you were able to reintegrate in an independent life and we don't see you much anymore? So that's a good thing and a bad thing. Because you're going to get different words from them, obviously, than we do being sort of drenched in it every day. I'm also developing a summary of the peer-run program evidence base, pulling out a lot of different sources of evidence-based reports on peer-run services, and we'll be kind of drafting a summary of that, and that would be a really important thing that you could have in your cadre of tools for best practices. And again, that really comes into the evidence and the proof points. So this is the piece where getting testimonials, getting the important perspective of current members, and also actually members from all stages of involvement, honestly. Why did people come in the first time? Why did they feel safe to come in? People that are regular members, why do they feel safe to stay? What are they getting out of it? What do they come back for? And people who've been able to reintegrate into daily life and don't, quote unquote, need the center anymore. What is it that got them to that point, and what did the peer run program have to do with that at all? So again, adding to our proof points, literal evidence from the evidence base of research, but also proof from the membership perspective. So that emotional benefit, this is one of the ones within our line of work. Thankfully, we folks who have gotten something out of the peer run programs are usually pretty willing to share. And so that's the emotional benefit piece is thankfully pretty easy to put words to. So then once you've got a draft ready, and again, we'll go back and look at this. We're going to come down and look at 1.4 on our own. But once you get a draft ready, engage your board with it. This is very much about the public face of the program to the community. It's also about the very core of the reason we're here, the mission. So that is certainly something within the purview of the board. And then encourage you to create a draft, engage them with it, encourage them to revise it if they want, or if they are fairly hands-off and prefer that you take it and finish it, then that's fine. But I think this is important work to engage your board with. Then this tool becomes a reference for all the communicating and messaging that you do, whether it's outreach flyers, funding proposals, education, networking with the community, and of course by education, that's as much educating the community and practitioners that you're there as a resource. We'll talk back through some of the work that we did with Honor and Roanoke. Again, when we got started first, we came up with a list of the other service providers that provide mental health supports and exactly what it is that they do. Then we looked at the target audience. So for example, she was finding that most of the folks they serve are adults in the age range of 20 to 70 years old, mainly 30 to 50, about 60% male. She's seen some progress in an increasing number of females, but is realizing that there's several different reasons, and that gets more into the psychographics about why females may be less likely to come. Let's see, that veterans right across the street, because there's a place called Trust House where veterans live. They stop in from the shelter. Geographically, they're mainly Roanoke City, and there are transportation reasons for that. Much fewer from Salem and the suburbs. Target audience, psychographics, one of the first things that she hears when people are coming in for the first time is that they were alone, or felt alone, or still feel alone, stuck in their apartment, are recently discharged from a hospital is another one. They don't have a support network, whether that's problems with family or they are literally geographically distant from their family. Most of the folks are connected in some way to the CSB. We're referred here by the CSB. Often right now, when they're first coming in, they feel a sense of reliance on whether it's that caseworker, the different support staff. So Roanoke obviously does have a relationship with the CSB staff to come tour the center and let them know. Same thing with Catawba, the hospital. On our own, Roanoke is part of the risk management contract for Catawba discharges. And on our own, Roanoke does wrap the Catawba hospitals. That's part of how they're getting folks from that area. But the important thing here is a lot of these peers feel pretty reliant on that structural support from the hospital or the CSB. So both alone and kind of only reliant on the system. With females, there's a question of whether or not part of it is like a fear factor of coming in alone, being afraid of being hit on. There may be an abuse history. So that's just a big part of where they're at right now. They're aware that's dynamic. Robin's been working on it in some different ways. And it's an opportunity actually for programming. It's something that we see as a need, is to reach out in a more specific way to women. Place in the recovery journey. She says most folks there really start out in a tough place. So I think now if we were to pause and say, well, how does this matter to a funder? How does this matter in marketing? What we're doing is we're really putting more of a human face on the types of folks that we're seeing come through the door. And what I'm hearing so much is that we're catching people when they're willing to step towards support when they're in a really vulnerable place, when they're in a really alone place, and that we offer a place where they're able to connect with others on their own timeline. There is no treatment plan. Connect with others on their own timeline and learn skills in groups for an independent life. And I personally don't know that that's fully understood about, for example, what goes on at Honor in Charlottesville as a Charlottesville resident for 10 years before I ever got to know this work. I don't know that people see that powerful transformation. So that's part of, once we craft these statements, really then saying, okay, well, knowing that internally this is what we believe about our work and what our peers have informed us is true about our work, how are we really going to carry that out through all of our messaging and through all of our fundraising appeals? I won't go through all of the steps that we went through with Robin Hubert. This file is going to be up in the meeting space if anybody ever wants to come back and reference the presentation to look at it in a little more detail, or you're welcome to call me or Robin Hubert to get some perspective on what we've created out of that. Once she and I worked through, and again, we're still working through the statement, we don't have a final one for Honor in Roanoke. Once we worked through that first set of the process of talking it out, of categorizing what we know about the program into those 7 different points, we created an action point list of things we needed to do to be able to move forward to a finished brand position statement. We want to go ahead and decide on the involvement of the board, when to introduce it to them, how involved they want to be. We want to back up some of our assumptions with some research. So we're going to look up Honor in Roanoke's demographic data from their own evaluation that we were just talking about last month. We're going to look up the Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Population demographic stats for adults. We're going to look up Catawba's discharge demographics. We're going to look up Trust House demographics. Again, a reason why that's important is not just to have this trove of data, but then that tells us what types of funding proposals we want to be looking for based on who it is we serve. And simple as that, whose funding sources want to serve a certain population, and do we serve those populations? You want to know that pretty clearly. Then we're going to ask our center members, anyone that wants to, peer members, what they get out of Honor in Roanoke, whether it's a paper survey or whether they're one-on-one conversations with staff. To the degree that you can get things on paper with a name and a signature that just acknowledges that they know it's going to be used in marketing materials, that way you've got it just for your own background research for the position statement, which you wouldn't need signed permission for that. So you have it for that, and you would have it for marketing. So if you can get folks to agree to sign off on a little testimonial acknowledging that they know that their first name may be in marketing, it would be great to combine those two at once. And then the third question was, or fourth question, are there any other stakeholders who see transformation that we want to ask? So that might be family members, that might be CSB employees, that might be your employees. Again, the current reason for collecting that information is to make sure you have you test your assumptions about your brand position statement, but this is also a great time to obtain that same material to be used for marketing if people are willing. And then also be sure to include a summary of the evidence base for peer-run programs, because that's a big part of why we do what we do. We know instinctively and through anecdotally that what we do matters, but there's also evidence-based research to back it up. And that's the summary that the co-op will be producing later this year. But of course, many of you may already know that stuff by heart because you've been doing this line of work longer than I have. And I'm going to just come back up as a last point, and we'll look at the vocal co-op one because it's just more finished than the Honor in Roanoke. And at this time, I would just ask you, if you think that this is a tool that you would be able to use within your organization to really give some clarity around what you do and how it's different than the rest of the supports that are offered in your area. And again, knowing that there are regional nonprofit technical assistance centers around Virginia. There's one in Lynchburg, there's one in Charlottesville. What I got out of this process, working through it for myself, is that we are the only nonprofit technical assistance center that specifically convenes directors of peer-run programs to develop nonprofit best practices that are informed by recovery values and that are also informed by publicly funded program requirements in Virginia, everything from purchasing to audit requirements to evaluation. And that the reason that we do this is I always think so much about wanting to support the individual program leaders, which is a really big part of what gives me energy throughout my day. But by talking through this, I also became keenly aware that it's important to communicate to other people because they may not realize it, that sustainable, so peer-run program nonprofits that can last because they have healthy boards, because they have healthy finances, sustainable peer-run programs are really important to recovery-focused mental health system. So if we want to be asking the public funders for more recovery-focused funding to come to peer control, then we need to really show that it can be used well and successfully and in the long term, and that is a really big part of what the co-op does. So for me, it's helped clarify. I know what I connect with most emotionally about my work, but to think through other parts of it that are going to be possibly more persuasive to a funder than what it is that I already connect with. So as a review, brand position statement is an internal tool. It's not for the website, it's not public messaging, but it does become a foundation for all of the public messaging. It's non-emotional, it's fact-based research. I mean, there's certainly one of the last questions is what's the emotional benefit of this work for people. So, but as far as the putting of it together, we're really looking for facts to inform it because we are competing for attention. In both the marketing realm and in the fundraising realm. So I would encourage everybody who wants to try this to find a partner. Again, feel free to reach out to me for the co-op to help with it or find a partner within your organization to talk it through, to write that down, to categorize it out, and then to really test those assumptions by talking with your membership or by doing some research and engage your board with it because it really does reflect the heart of what we do. I appreciate you guys' time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I'm going to stay on a bit and see if there are any questions or anything that come up. And look forward to talking to you anytime. Of course, you can go onto the website at vocalsupportcenter.org and be taken to the co-op page directly. So that's vocalsupportcenter.org. And we are going to be working based on your feedback from the needs assessments on some website revisions, but it is going to be a little while. So appreciate your patience over the next few months while we're working on that. But you guys have a great day. Thanks.